like if I label the pancreas for you to identify, I could ask you about acinar cells, for example, right? So make sure that your information doesn't just stay stuck on the slides, that it can shift over to this.
Are you ready? Or are you doing that now?
Oh, you're recording me?
I will be soon if you want.
Oh. Okay, if we, let me get something to point with. All right, so if we're starting up at the top here, and remember this view of the head is pretty much the same as the sagittally sectioned head model. So the opening here is the frontal sinus, behind the frontal bone. Below it, off to the side here, is the cribriform plate, the roof of the nose. Back wall, we have the sphenoid bone with the sphenoid sinus. And then looking at the nasal cavity, we start out with the tip of the nose, made of hyaline cartilage to resist compression. We have the superior, middle, and inferior nasal turbinates, which in the skull are called the concha. Turbinates means that it's just covered with mucosa. As we look at the floor of the mouth, we have the maxilla anteriorly and the palatine bones just behind that, and then behind the palatine bones, the soft palate and the uvula. As we look at the back wall, below where the sphenoid bone is, we have the pharyngeal tonsils and the opening of the auditory tube called the meatus. So that makes up the nasopharynx. Then if we look at the oral cavity, the roof is the hard palate and soft palate. And then at the base of the, here's the tongue. At the base of the tongue are the lingual tonsils. Then if we look on the laterally in the pharynx, the oropharynx, we have the palatine tonsils here. And then that's the oropharynx. Then we move into the laryngopharynx. So we have the hyoid bone here attached to the epiglottis. And then under that we have the larynx. This big bit of blue here would be the thyroid cartilage, and under it the cricoid cartilage. Within the larynx, the whole thing being the larynx, we have the vocal cord here. And then just to mention that the hyoid bone attached to the epiglottis is going to move with the swallow in such a way that the epiglottis bends over to close off the airway. Okay, getting out of the laryngopharynx, we have the esophagus going down through the chest. There's an upper esophageal sphincter and a lower esophageal sphincter. One to not let air into the stomach and the other to not let acid into the esophagus. Then we have the stomach. The folds are called the rugal folds, R-U-G-A-L. 3 parts. We have the fundus, the body, and the antrum. Then the little exit muscle is the pylorus, and we get to the duodenum. So the duodenum is the first part of the small intestine, comes around here. Then we have the second part of the small intestine, the jejunum, and the third part is the ileum. The ileum is then going to dump via the ileocecal valve about 2 quarts of fluid into the cecum. Hanging off the cecum is the appendix. The water then is going to go through the ascending colon, this back in, the transverse colon, descending colon, sigmoid, rectum, anus. The corners by the liver, that corner of the colon would be called the hepatic flexure. Then in the left upper quadrant, that corner of the colon would be called the splenic flexure. Then to go behind the stomach and the transverse colon is the pancreas. In white are the ducts that are sending, so in the pancreas itself has the acinar cells making the digestive enzymes. It's an exocrine gland, so it empties those enzymes via the ducts in white to dump into the duodenum where the food is. Also in the pancreas, remember the islets of Langerhans with the alpha and beta cells making glucagon and insulin. And then here in the right upper quadrant is the liver. It's got the gallbladder sitting underneath of it. The liver makes the bile. It stores in the gallbladder, and then it too is going to end up in the small intestine. That should do it.